She stepped into the glittering auction hall, and the room seemed to hold its breath, then sneer. No designer down, no diamonds, just a simple black midi dress, neat flats, and a small leather clutch held tightly in her hands. Around her shimmered a sea of satin, sequins, and whispered judgments. This was Belvoir House, one of the most exclusive jewelry auction houses in Europe, a place where emerald tiaras and sapphire brooches fetched millions with a single raise of a paddle. And here she was, plain, unadorned, and, in their eyes, out of place. Her name was Isla Hart, late 20s, hazel eyes that missed nothing, straight auburn hair tucked into a low bun, a woman who had spent more nights in libraries than in lounges, and more years working than anyone in this room would believe. She wasn't here for spectacle. She wasn't here to flaunt. She was here because her late grandmother had once loved a certain antique diamond pendant, and tonight it was coming up for sale. A piece Isla could finally afford, barely, after years of saving. That was her only intention, to buy one piece with meaning. A quiet gesture of remembrance. But in this room, intentions didn't matter. Appearances did. And the eyes that followed Isla as she moved toward her seat were merciless. Who let the help in? A sleek woman in emerald silk hissed behind her fan. Probably here to watch, not buy, another whispered, smirking behind her champagne glass. A man with slicked back hair and a velvet tuxedo eyed her like an insect beneath glass. The auction hadn't even begun, but the verdict had already been passed. She didn't belong here. And as the lights dimmed and the first pieces were unveiled, they had no idea, not yet, whose hand would soon raise that paddle, and whose name would leave this room on every stunned, whispered tongue. The auctioneer's voice echoed softly across the hall. Lot 14, a 19th century diamond pendant known as the Heart Star. Isla's breath caught. There it was, the pendant her grandmother had once told stories about, its delicate filigree shining beneath the glass. She reached for her paddle, and that's when it began. A sharp voice sliced through the murmurs. "Excuse me, are you certain you're in the right seat?" Isla turned. A woman in a vivid green gown, emeralds dripping from her neck, stared down at her, lips pursed in theatrical concern. Before Isla could reply, another voice chimed in. "That section is reserved for active bidders, not observers." Laughter followed, sharp, rehearsed. Several heads turned now. A cluster of influencers near the back began filming. "Trash content for tomorrow's reels," one of them whispered, deliberately loud. A young male attendant approached, clipboard in hand, eyes flicking nervously from the women to Isla. "Miss," he began, voice low, "do you have an invitation and bidder's clearance?" Isla's heart thudded, but her voice remained steady. "Yes, right here." She produced her confirmation, carefully printed, all in order. The attendant checked it, blinked, then paled slightly. "Of course, sorry, Miss Hart." But by now, the damage was done. Look at that. She printed her invitation. Probably can't even afford the opening bid. The whispers grew louder, turning heads. Phones were raised, flashes flickered. "Trash doesn't belong here," one voice rang clear. And this time, the laughter echoed across the marble walls. An older man in a midnight blue tuxedo, clearly someone of weight, approached now. "Is there an issue?" he asked, tone cold. Before Isla could answer, the woman in green spoke first. "She's disrupting the auction, sitting where she shouldn't, drawing attention." A murmur of false agreement rippled. "It's highly improper," someone added. "Escort her out," another voice called. And then, a final blow from the velvet tuxedo man. We can't have charity cases lowering the tone of Belvar House. The young attendant hesitated, caught between orders and what he just verified. But under the glares of the elite, he finally bent toward Isla. Miss Hart, I'm terribly sorry, but perhaps if you would step aside? The world seemed to narrow, heat rising in her chest, eyes burning her from every side. But Isla did not move. She stood. No. Her voice was quiet, but it cut through the venom like glass. I am a verified bidder. You saw my clearance, and I will remain. For one beat, the room held its breath. Then a phone camera zoomed in, catching the tension. Oh, this is good, a woman whispered gleefully. She thinks she belongs here. What they didn't know was that at this very moment, upstairs in the private office, a certain high net worth VIP had just arrived. And in less than 10 minutes, the entire room's smirks would vanish. The pendant glistened beneath the auction lights, but Isla could hardly see it now, not through the heat rising in her skin. The hall buzzed with smug energy. A photographer's lens clicked. A phone screen zoomed in on her face. Poor thing, someone murmured. She'll be out before lot 15. But then, the atmosphere shifted. Not because Isla spoke, but because of who had just entered the building. The tall glass doors at the rear of the hall whispered open. A subtle ripple moved through the crowd, a current of recognition. Heads turned. Conversation faltered. He was here. Sebastian Locke, one of the most powerful private collectors in Europe. Silent partner in multiple auction houses, including Belvar House itself. A man known for arriving rarely and only when it mattered. And tonight, he had come in person. He moved with deliberate ease, tailored midnight suit, ice blue cufflinks, presence impossible to ignore. 2 discreet aides followed him, murmuring updates. The auctioneer spotted him, paled slightly, and straightened. The staff moved subtly to accommodate him. But it was when Sebastian's gaze swept the room and landed on Isla that everything changed. A flicker of sharp recognition lit his eyes. And the sea of mocking faces between them? He didn't even look at them. Without hesitation, Sebastian crossed the room, right to her. Miss Hart. His voice was cool, deep, cutting through the hum like a blade. The crowd froze. Miss Hart? He knew her? Isla looked up, stunned, but held her composure. Mr. Locke. She inclined her head calmly. Behind them, whispers erupted. Who is she? Why is he speaking to her? Did she know him all along? Sebastian turned, and now his voice rose deliberately. Is there an issue with my guest's seating? Guest, not stranger, not observer. Guest. The emerald-clad woman blanched, her smirk evaporated. I wasn't aware. Sebastian's gaze hardened. Then be aware now. Miss Hart is not only a verified bidder, she is also here on my personal invitation. He glanced at the auctioneer. Ensure she remains undisturbed. The color drained from multiple faces. Phones lowered, fast. Even the velvet tuxedo man paled, suddenly studying the floor. Sebastian turned back to Isla, offering a subtle smile. Shall we? He gestured toward the front rows, the premium bidder section, reserved for VIPs. Without missing a beat, Isla lifted her chin. Of course. And, before a hall full of silenced eyes, she walked arm in arm with the most powerful man in the room to the seats of privilege. As they passed the Emerald Woman's table, her trembling hand knocked over her champagne glass. No one laughed this time. From her new seat, Isla could feel the weight of every stare, But now, none dared mock. The influencers' phones lay face down. The whispers had turned to stunned silence. And when Lot 14 was called again, she raised her paddle, steady, unshaken. Bid accepted. Moments later, the heart star was hers. When she stood to leave, pendant in hand, Sebastian walked beside her once more. "They won't forget you after tonight," he murmured. Isla smiled faintly. "Good. Neither will I." And as they stepped through the grand doors into the night, the auction hall behind them remained frozen, a gallery of fallen pride and stunned disbelief. They had judged her by her dress, by her seat, by her silence. But tonight, she had reminded them all. Power rarely shouts. Sometimes it simply raises a hand and owns the room. The night air was crisp as Isla and Sebastian emerged from Belvoir House. For a moment, the city noise swallowed the silence they left behind, but not the weight of what had just happened. A sleek black car waited at the curb. Sebastian's aide opened the door, but Isla hesitated, glancing back at the grand auction hall. Lights still gleamed behind the marble columns, but the laughter that had filled them earlier was gone. Inside, the emerald-draped woman sat frozen, phone untouched. The influencers whispered now, but not about Isla, about how they'd misjudged. And the velvet tuxedo man, he had slipped quietly to the back of the room, head bowed. The heart star pendant rested in Isla's clutch, no longer a dream, but hers. Not because of favors, not because of pity. Because when the world told her to shrink, she had stood. Sebastian's voice was low beside her. "You handled them well." Isla smiled faintly. "I wasn't sure I would." A pause. "But my grandmother, she used to say, 'The stone doesn't ask who polishes it, it simply shines.'" Sebastian nodded. "You've done more than shine tonight." A knowing glance. "I suspect a few of them will think twice before judging the next simple woman they see." The door closed behind them. The car pulled away. And already, across private chats and hidden circles, the story spread. She knew Sebastian Locke. She bought Lot 14. We laughed, and we were wrong. Later that night, at a quiet cafe far from the glitter of Belvoir House, Isla traced her fingers over the pendant's delicate filigree. Not for show, not for status, for memory. For every whispered story her grandmother had told, of beauty, of courage, of choosing dignity when the world offered none. A message pinged on her phone, from an unknown number. "You don't know me. I was there tonight. I didn't speak up, but I wanted to say, you inspired me. Thank you." Isla's breath caught. Another message followed, and another. The ripple had begun. And across town, the influencers who had laughed the loudest scrambled to delete their clips. Too late. Screenshots had already circulated, and not in their favor. Their sponsors were watching now. The emerald-draped woman? She'd wake to find herself the face of a cautionary meme. How not to judge a room. But Isla didn't need to see any of it. She had won something far greater. Not just the heart star, but proof for herself that even in a room built to break her, she had stood her ground. And sometimes that was the rarest jewel of all.